everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Party Like a Marketer. I'm your host, Lisa Buffo, founder and CEO of the Cannabis Marketing Association. I can't wait to see all of you at this year's Cannabis Marketing Summit, June 21st through 23rd in Denver, Colorado, for 2.5 days of cannabis networking, best practices from the top marketing and communications professionals at the peak of summer in Denver, Colorado. We've got a Brandon retail pop-up, a rooftop after party, solo sessions, workshops, and all food and non-alcoholic beverages are included. Further, we're launching our CMA Sevens Awards, Cannabis Marketing Awards, focused on awarding excellence in effective and authentic marketing that advances the image of cannabis. All marketers who have a ticket to the summit get a free entry to the CMA Sevens, and the award show happens on Friday, June 23rd at lunch at the summit. Today's conversation features Andy Gonzales, Marketing Account Executive of Townsquare Media. Andy is an experienced media and marketing professional with a passion for the cannabis industry. And over the course of his career, he has worked with a diverse range of clients in the cannabis space, including dispensaries, growers, and manufacturers. He's skilled in developing comprehensive marketing strategies that leverage a variety of channels, including broadcast radio, digital media, social media, and events to help clients build brand recognition and attract new customers. Okay, welcome everybody to today's episode of Party Like a Marketer. Today's guest is Andy Gonzales of Townsquare Media. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely glad to be here.
Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into cannabis marketing, your background, and what it is that you do at Townsquare?
Absolutely. Yes. So with marketing in general, I've been doing that now for about 5-6 years. And through various roles, working with startups as a director of marketing, social media management, stuff of that nature. And basically cannabis, it kind of came into the play, a few years back when I had took on a job as a brand ambassador. So actually working with a brand, in dispensaries, working with clients, kind of fast forward a little bit further down the road, I ended up working with Townsquare Media, which is the third largest media company. We have 74 markets where radio stations are throughout the US. And one of the main focuses is sensitive categories. So cannabis and marketing is something that I do on the day-to-day. And I love the fact that I have that in-person experience working with the actual dispensary owners and brands as well. So a little bit about kind of me.
I like how you call it a sensitive category. I've never heard it referred to it as that way. What else falls into sensitive category?
So sensitive categories consist of anything that has to do with, let's say, gambling, political, anything to do with medical. All of those are going to fall into sensitive categories. And of course, alcohol, drugs, things of that nature are as well. Anything that's federally regulated typically will be considered a sensitive category.
Okay, that makes sense. And then tell us a little bit more about Townsquare. You said it's one of the largest media companies.
Correct.
I know, what does that mean? What does that mean?
So what does that mean? Yeah, absolutely. So our assets include clusters of radio stations throughout the US. Like I said, we're in 74 markets. And typically what we focus on is the small business owner. We're in the mid to small size markets. And we focus on full funnel marketing. So we go through all channels. One branch of the company is called Townsquare Interactive, which focuses on website design and SEO optimization. And then from there, we go to our Townsquare Ignite division, which is strictly programmatic audio, social media, programmatic advertising, whether it's display video, OTT, which is going to be your connected TV. All those digital tactics would fall under that division. And then we also have our live events division, where we put on local events for, in our communities, wherever those radio stations are located. We go out there and we work with, whether it be a brand or a specific type of cause, we back it up and we help produce the events as well.
And I want to talk about events, but let's first talk about radio, because we actually haven't talked about radio on this show yet. And I think there's a lot of confusion around it in the cannabis industry, but also like, is it a viable marketing channel? Like, who still listens to radio, and what is that? How does that fit into the marketing mix for cannabis businesses? Can you talk about kind of the state of radio in general, but then in context to cannabis as well?
Yes, absolutely. So radio in general actually is, one of the largest mediums that you can reach an audience. As of right now, when we're looking at statistics, our reach with radio has actually surpassed regular network television. As you know, with the wars going on right now with cable cutters, that audience has now, dwindled down. And so radio still has about 86% capturing audience wherever that market is located. Great awareness tactic, and also just a way to stand out wherever you are there in the local community. I've seen, a lot of brands that still use radio, and it does drive traffic. It also does, just make that differentiator fact that you're on a local station. You have that local tie to the community.
And when you say 86% of the market, is that like people who have cars? Is it just people who live there? Like I'm a cable cutter, so I'm like, who is that?
Yeah. So that's going to be your major demographics. So like 18 to 50 years old. With radio, broadcast radio, we're actually tying into 86% of that market share. So there's still a lot of audiences that are, traveling, and they still engage in radio. So it still is a viable source. Okay.
Interesting. And I do like so let's talk about that for cannabis businesses. Like, what are cannabis companies? I'm guessing dispensaries in particular would be a fit for radio. And I think you've got a good point. And we talk about this on the show and at CMA a lot about how it's important to know your customer, but of course your local community. And with retailers, it is all about who's around you. It's your local community and getting plugged in with that. So they often have different marketing strategies than brands or really other folks in the space because they're so hyper local. So what have you seen cannabis companies do on radio? What is effective, and what are some best practices for those who might be considering it?
Absolutely. Well, we still are, have to abide by the general regulations. So one of the things that we can't do on radio is target anyone under the age of 21. It has to be very specific to that. The copy just can't mention anything of like any type of therapeutic, result or anything like that, because the FDA, of course, doesn't allow that. And other than that, I mean, you can talk about what it is you have, a little bit about the product. You just can't make any claims, like this is going to kill your illness or anything like that. We've ran, quite a bit of campaigns where we were focusing on like a specific time event for a dispensary. Let's say they were engaging like in a 420 celebration or something of that nature. And how we typically work, which is a little bit different than like your average agency as a media company, and this is something I forgot to mention, is we actually are a publisher. We're one of the largest publishers throughout all of our brands. We have a website. Our local DJs, they produce 3 articles a day, and that gets all put out into the community. So one of the differentiating factors that we have is we're able to utilize our assets. So what I mean by that is with each station, you have a website. You also have an app. You also have a Facebook page. And so when I've worked with brands in the past, we kind of target it in 2 different separate ways. We are putting them on air, but we're also utilizing, our websites and our inventory to get that message out in a creative way. So whether it's a display ad or an actual site takeover, we're taking over the skin of the website. Those are abilities that we have that aren't traditionally available in the market.
I see. So it's publishing and outbound marketing, for lack of a better word, that you guys are able to do as far as programmatic SEO, radio, things like that.
Correct.
Cool. Okay. Okay. And then have you seen any specific like results for cannabis company on radio? Like, how do you track that? I'm guessing, and you're based in Colorado, which we probably should have mentioned. You guys are in Fort Collins and work with
Right.
a lot of businesses in the Front Range. But like, what are those best practices for cannabis businesses when they approach a radio? Like, how are they able to kind of measure success there? And then do you target like within a super local radio station? Is it throughout the state? How does that work?
Okay, perfect. Yes. So our stations are set up to where they virtually range from Denver all the way to Cheyenne. We have 5 different brands. The way that we measure this is really unique, and I like the way it works, is we're able to put a pixel on the backside of the website, and we tie that into our analytics. So when the actual spot airs, what we do is we try to measure, like within a certain amount of minutes, did that customer, or did we see a spike in traffic on the website? So with that being said, we kind of look back as we're running these ads and we're, doing certain day parts, whether that be the AM drive, midday drive, or even, an evening drive. Sometimes the weekends might be better. We go back and we're able to kind of break down that data and see, okay, we ran a Thursday spot at midday and we saw that, increased maybe 4 or 5 visitors that came to the site during that time frame that normally we're not seeing that traffic. So then we could come back and say, okay, advertiser, Mr. Customer, dispensary owner, we're seeing a more effective reach during this specific day part. How about we, spend more budget on those timeframes versus just scattering it out or doing like a broad rotation?
I see. So it's like a timing consideration.
That's typically how we measure it. Yep, we look at the pixel through the website traffic, which is tied into our Townsquare analytics. We're able to, like I said, measure that traffic. When that commercial actually aired, when the spot aired, did we see, so many customers go to the website, and we can kind of gauge response with that aspect.
And I'm guessing you probably do it around like, is the best commuting times, morning, early morning, later afternoon, lunch, like what's considered ideal radio windows?
So typically how I build a schedule is, first, what we look at as we look at your demographic, right? Who's your ideal customer? Are you going after medical cannabis consumers, or are you going after retail recreational consumers? And then from there, I would match, and depending on what genre or what type of radio station we have, we would then go in there and we would look at the high traffic times, right? When we see the most listeners that are actually on air, they're not on air, but they're listening at that time. And from there, what we'll do is we'll schedule, basically a certain amount of spots. Now, the way radio works, as you all know, with marketing, it's all about reach and frequency, right? Reaching the right people the right amount of times. So typically, like in a 2-week period, I wouldn't run anything lower than about 40 spots. And I would strategically stagger those spots to make sure we're hitting the right people at the right time.
And a spot is like a 30-second commercial or something that you like, a commercial you hear on radio.
So ad copy with radio is broken down to 3 different options. You have a 15-second spot. You also have a 30-second spot and then a 60-second spot. So those are going to be your 3 options. What we've found, through data and research, is the longer the commercial, the less attention that you kind of grab. So I've seen the most success with 15-second and 30-second spots. Now, if it's for a specific event where you want to give out a lot of information, then I would definitely recommend going with the 60-second spot.
That makes sense. Yeah, and it's almost like if you're going to go to the website, you want to leave them with something, a question. You want to leave them with something to think about. So they're going to go, oh, let me look that up and learn more, as opposed to just like, okay, I heard the whole pitch, I'll make this decision later. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So anything else you want to say about radio we haven't talked about?
Yeah, just radio in general with cannabis is unique, right? So if you're a brand, let's say that's in 5 or 6 different states, that's great and all, and your brand awareness needs to be at a local level. So I would recommend, if it's anyone that's in like a smaller community or even a larger segment, I would recommend radio as a great awareness tactic that kind of keeps you as a differentiating factor. There's not a whole ton of people that are getting onto radio and using that. So if you have the budget available and you are using other tactics on top of radio, it does make a good fit. And we've seen success when you're layering in digital on top of radio.
Can we talk about that a little bit? One, budget, like what does radio cost in relation to other marketing channels? And then I want to talk a little bit about digital and how like the layered approach works. Because as we know, cannabis marketers are fighting for really small budgets. So like they're fighting, they have small budgets. So like what is a typical spot cost? Like how should they think about that?
Absolutely. So as you all know, with radio, it works on a couple different things. Inventory has a lot to do with it, right? When it comes to rates, it's on availability. So during certain seasons, political seasons, things of that nature, rates may go up a little bit. And also, rankings play a little part into that as well. How many people are we reaching? How many listeners are on at the specific time? That all plays into the actual rate. And rates can range, anywhere from, $15 to $20 a spot, all the way up to $40, $65 a spot. It really just depends on the market you're in and how many spots that you actually want to run. And like I said, 20 to 40 in a 2-week period is where you want to be, definitely.
That makes sense. Okay, so can we talk about radio? And I mean, really, this is a bigger conversation about marketing, but also you were saying it's more effective when you layer in digital and programmatic and SEO and some of these other things on top of that. So we know that's an omni-channel strategy. I want to talk about that. Well, let's talk about that first, and then I'll kind of back into events, because I did find it interesting how you said if you do it over a 2 or 3 week period, like how do you pick that? Is it around a promotion maybe you've got going on, or an event that you're hosting, or something like 420 where you want to do the few weeks around that? Like can you talk about that first actually, and then we'll layer in the other channels?
Absolutely. Yes. So, I mean, you can run a schedule, for a whole month if you want. I recommend doing it like 2 to 3 weeks out of the month, and usually staggering those either first or second part of the month. So either the first part or second part. And what that does is it changes the way that the message is coming through, right? It's at a different day part. So you want to make sure you're hitting everybody. Another thing that we always try to focus on is if we have a long-term client that's running radio for us consistently, is we try to change up ad copy. There is some type of fatigue, I don't know if you've experienced it, but when you've seen that ad or heard that ad multiple times, after a while, you kind of try to, block it out. And so what we try to do is make sure that we're keeping that fresh content, we're doing call to actions on those ad copies, and that they run for a specific amount of time. Now, if you're shooting for an event, we always want to give ourselves at least 2 to 3 weeks prior to when you start promoting that event. So if you're doing a campaign, let's say for 420 celebration, you want to get ahead of it and start running your radio before you actually launch that campaign. So that way it's already out, the name's out there, people are hearing it. And then when they get hit from these other channels, they're starting to recollect that we've already heard that.
Okay, cool. And then how does that, so let's talk about the digital component. When you said you see more success when you layer in programmatic in some of these other strategies. What does that mean, and how do you do that? Because I think particularly from a programmatic standpoint, there's a lot of confusion around what it is and how it can help a business and how it factors into the marketing mix. So can you give some context as to what programmatic is for you and how you would tie it to something like a radio campaign?
Absolutely. So working with clients in the past, when we were able to, bring on radio, they had a budget where we were able to allocate to radio and digital. The way we do it, because we're limited with regulations, as you know, we can only hit 21 and over. We do programmatic advertising, and I break it down into 3 tactics. The first tactic is called advanced audience target. So that's when you can specifically go after like an age group or, a male, female, whatever that type is. And then you can also go and look at like buyer's intent, behaviors, things of that nature. Someone that's interested, in like wellness or medicine, we can target those people. I would also like layer that in with a geofencing. It's called hyper local mobile. And what that is able to do is hit specific areas. So if you want to go after, let's say a competitor and you're right next to another dispensary, you can hit digital ads and send those into the other dispensary and still, engage with customers. And then from there, keyword targeting is huge. We're able to go in and display a creative ad, whether that's an image or a video, and we're able to go in there and when someone's online and they're searching, we can put that ad in front of them as well. So it's a three-pronged approach. When I've seen the most success is having those different attributes and programming the campaign, which is programmatic programmatic advertising, right? Programmatic digital is programming that campaign to hit the exact audience you want to hit. So we can get very granular and hit specific people versus just spray and pray, right? And so when you layer that in on top of radio and it's all in the same area, then you're hitting that customer 3, 4, 5 different ways. Overall, we do see, a return on investment on that.
And when you work with cannabis companies, how do they approach you? Like, do they say, we want women 35 to 44, or we want those who are like medical consumers? Like, how specific are they getting, and what is that conversation?
Absolutely. So every process that when we work with the client, we first do what's called a CNA. It's a customer needs analysis. So what we try to do is really understand the brand, right? What type of dispensary is this? Is this a location that is specific to just medical, CBD, or is it CBD with THC? How does that look? Because as you know, regulations of CBD are a little bit more lax and there is more opportunity there. So we have to differentiate what is their specific product, who their target audience is, and where they live. And what I do personally is I do a lot of market research, and I go into the specific community that they're in, and we look at the cume, right? What is this market made out of? Where do people shop? How are people consuming media? Is that on social media? Is it through all these other channels? And then from there, with what we have available, we make those recommendations. So it's a very in-depth conversation that we have to get it started, and it can vary. It could be something that's just straight recreational, or it could be something that's medical, and we're going after like the older, age group where we don't really want to hit younger age groups. So it's all dependent on their specific needs.
Okay, that makes sense. Anything else you want to add about that before we talk about live events?
So yeah, so when cannabis companies normally, approach or look for our assistance, they're trying to find different avenues that they have either not been able to prove that it's successful, or they just don't have the knowledge on how to do it at all. So, they come to us, and the way that process looks like is before we can actively run a campaign, we take that project and we take it through our legal counsel, and we have, our internal team look at it, review it, make sure that we're in guidelines. As you know, every state has their own regulations, so we make sure that we're on top of that. The setup process, we can take on the creative. If the client has their personal creative, they bring it through, still goes through legal, but then we get that process approved and we begin to launch the campaign. The way it works throughout the campaign is we're looking for, optimizations when we do reporting meetings. So at the end of every month, we sit down with the client, we go over what's performing well, what can use improvement, and where to shift budget. We need to put budget more into keyword targeting versus, let's say, radio or just regular display ad. We then make that decision with the client and kind of guide them, hey, look, this makes more sense because we're seeing a better, result with this specific tactic.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's a good point that you mentioned about having your own internal legal team, because cannabis companies, they have lawyers, but they're expensive to work with. And I think when you need to talk with them about every single marketing campaign, that can eat your budget. So it's nice to be able to partner with someone that is doing that for you, that you can trust, particularly if you're running bigger campaigns that have longer time frames. And to that point, do you then work with brands that may be national where they're in a few different states and they're running radio spots or programmatic in a few different states with you?
Absolutely. So we do have clients, like I said, we're in 74 different markets. So with that being said, we're kind of spread out throughout the entire US.
And when you say markets, is that like major metropolitan areas, like cities?
They're going to be small to mid-sized markets. So for instance, we're out of the DMA of Denver, but we're in Fort Collins. So down in Texas, like Tyler, Texas is one of our other markets. They're a little smaller outside of bigger metropolitan markets.
I see.
And one of the things that we've actually, brought to a client in the past was doing a type of co-op deal, I guess you can call it, not necessarily co-op, but it's where like a producer or a brand, like let's say it's a vape company or even just a specific product that a dispensary owner carries in their dispensary. What they did is basically split that budget in half. So the product, the producer, the one that's supplying the product, splits half the budget with the actual dispensary. And so we've worked together to drive traffic and then kind of split that cost, right? We have your product in our dispensary, we're selling it. We also want to advertise, both benefit from that. And so that's kind of how that works. It's a cool model of trying to save money. You can work on a project with multiple different vendors and not have to put up that full cost.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And that goes with a lot of what we've seen in the cannabis industry too, where I think like brands and retailers will work together, and these like co-marketing partnerships can be really helpful when you are partnering with someone who has a very similar goal, if not the same goal, and it's mutually win-win. It allows you to split cost, and like we even see it with billboards in some places where it's like, go to this retailer and buy these products, and it allows them to split the cost, but also get the same message and the same goal accomplished. So I like how that speaks to that more broadly.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. Well, I do want to talk about events because I think that events are back. Yay. I know it's been like a year and a half technically, but it still is like great that we can do them again, and that we had so long where we couldn't. And I think events are something the cannabis industry leans on very heavily because they are, well, when it comes to any type of product, it's helpful to be able to see it, touch it, understand it, but also build that trust. And I think when you have an in-person touch point and you see a display or you're talking to a rep, it's just different in person than on the phone or over Zoom. And it's also, I think in some ways, a lot easier when you're at an event where it's this like mutual ground versus like in a store or, somewhere else. So can you talk to me about like the role that events play in the marketing mix, and specifically how you utilize them either for clients or on behalf of Townsquare? Because I know you use it as a marketing avenue for your business and your B2B. And what we have found in our research is that cannabis marketing is both B2B and B2C. If you're a brand, you have to market to retailers and get into retail shelves, but you also have to connect with your audience and make sure that there are customers out there going into said retailer and purchasing your product. So B2B and B2C are very different strategies, but I think events can play in nicely to both of that. And it's just a business strategy in general. So how do you leverage events as yourself at Townsquare, but also how do you see cannabis businesses using them?
Absolutely. So the main event, model mix up is, where you're getting revenue from, but ultimately, like you said, it's really building that trust and that, interest where, the client can see the face of the actual brand. One of the things that we deal a lot with is sponsorships, right? And that's getting that name up there, whether it's, for a specific type of event, whether it's like a learn event or it's an actual music festival, giving a brand that's in cannabis the ability to be able to just put their name on, where thousands of people are going to see this, has proven to be effective when you also layer in other things, right? So with events, like by themselves, they're great. And I think that they do accomplish quite a bit. But I also think that you got to be strategic on the way that you plan that out. Let me give you a quick example. So we did have a pretty large event where we had a client come in and they were sponsoring like a specific signage for like an entry of an event, right? They came in and they knew they were going to be there. So while the event was actually running, they also did programmatic ads. So these people were on their phones uploading, social media pictures as well. And so they were getting hit with an ad, and then they're also seeing the face. And so it's more familiarity, I think, than anything. It's an awareness play, obviously, but I have seen, when people invest and they spend that time, that a lot of relationships are built out of events, strong relationships, that last and turn into multiple other opportunities. So definitely recommend them if you have the ability to get in it, even if it's just a smaller event. I mean, that extra channel is really great if you're trying to grow your brand.
Yeah, and I think with events, like one thing we see in the cannabis industry, I mean, we've got our upcoming Cannabis Marketing Summit, June 21st through 23rd, shameless plug for everybody in Denver. There's also like the event circuit where, you've got the events you go to, you keep going back to them, but it allows you to have touch points throughout the year with people and build a relationship. And it takes some of the pressure off too of being like, oh, I've got 2 days to make this happen. Like it's almost the same in person as it is digitally, where you need multiple touch points to build that trust, to build that understanding, to have those conversations. So if you can have that, it allows you to like get to your goal faster and also be open to new ideas and new people. That, is just, again, much harder to do when you're not out there in the field.
Absolutely. Speaking a little bit more on events, another tactic that you guys can kind of play into is giving a call to action or a follow-up. So sometimes on a sign, you might put like a QR code, right? If you're just trying to advertise the brand, that's great. But if you can give them some type of incentive or some way to kind of research you or even go to the website, then we've seen even more conversion, along those lines. So just an idea, with that.
Yes. And have you seen, tell us about the different events that you go to? I know we've talked about this a little bit. They're not necessarily cannabis specific, but what are the different events you go to and how do you see them working for this industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So me personally, and with our company, I mean, I go to multiple events throughout the year. Music festivals are huge, especially with cannabis. Like music goes very well. Art festivals are also huge. If you get a cannabis sponsor into one of those, I mean, it's great because it also plays on that creative side of things. Educational expos. Just got recently back from the NOCO Hemp Expo, which was down in Colorado Springs, which was really a great event just to kind of get out there and me going to learn more about, all the things that are in the industry. So whether you're trying to, engage in education or fun and entertainment, there is so much opportunity and you'd be surprised. I mean, prices sometimes aren't as significant as you think they are. It depends on the person that's actually coordinating the event, how big the company is. Some events are put on for nonprofit as well, or for a specific cause. So there's multiple ways to tie in your brand and give that humanized, local touch to it, right? It's showing that not only do you guys support the local community, but you believe in whatever's going on, whatever that may be.
Yes, and I think too, for cannabis companies, like you're saying, when you intersect with some of these other non-cannabis specific, whether it's music or art, but it's complementary, you're unexpected. So it's kind of the point of that, keeping it fresh and almost that element of surprise when you were talking about, changing up the ad copy, that's great. And you definitely want to do that, but also where can you be where someone's going to be surprised and happy to see you? And it's going to be complementary or different or out of the box, as opposed to just what you expect to see on, when you watch TV and you see commercials, you're like, I was expecting that, or, your attention gets caught, and that is such valuable time when you do something a little bit different, a little more creative. And I think being at these types of events can play into that and has really unlimited opportunity. I know we've seen in Colorado, there are events there's like a lot for the outdoor industry, which is also quite like I would put it in that same bucket as complementary to music and art and like outdoor festivals, like that whole outdoor culture is very Colorado, which is the Colorado resident, the cannabis consumer, like there's so much overlap there. So there's different ways to engage with the community that isn't always have to be in a cannabis specific way, but does like help from a marketing perspective. And you can always test it out, right? And like and when you're in person, you can do things like those lead gen forms, you can capture business cards, you can, give out products or sample, not necessarily THC if you're cannabis directly, but you can do t-shirts or swag bags or coupons or things like that, that do allow you to sort of attribute that ROI and get that name out there, but also like generate sales.
Absolutely. And, speaking a little bit more on that, one of the things that I see a lot of clients do is while they're at these events, they are using a QR code to do like a lead gen form. And then with that information, that email address is so valuable. They turn that into an email campaign, and then tie it into a push notification campaign. I mean, it's endless. One event, if you do it right, you really can capture a whole lot more about your consumer. Do a survey, when you're talking with people, what products do you prefer most? And then just kind of use it as a learning experience to really understand the customer. And then from there, use that data to follow up and create, more and more interest, give them incentives, call to actions, things that would drive that customer into the actual store or to your website, whatever you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. I want to ask about some specific advice that you have for marketers. I know when you work in a role like this, you get to see lots of different campaigns. You get to see what works, what doesn't, and which I think is like very cool about a position like yours, where you actually work for the company and see, what works for different, what different types of campaigns work for different types of clients, what's been more successful, what hasn't. So what would your advice be to cannabis marketers who might be considering either earlier on in their kind of marketing journey, or who are considering doing this type of like omni-channel campaign where they're utilizing different strategies, either with one company or throughout multiple?
Absolutely. So as I think back, I think the biggest hindrance that I've found a lot of these campaigns is all where your online presence is. So what I mean by that is the website, the SEO. The way those are set up are extremely important, especially when it comes to ad creatives. Sometimes, you might get approved to run an ad, but when you go through and then the website is saying something that's not in alignment with regulations, those things can prevent or shut down the campaign altogether. So one of the pieces of advice that I would definitely recommend, and I think it's something that kind of gets overlooked, is really digging down deep to create a website that's not only SEO optimized and has the metadata to be able to, locate you and find exactly what it is that you have, but also to make sure that website isn't leaning too far to one way or the other, where it's going to interfere with the campaign that you're running. So that's definitely a piece of advice that I would recommend if you're looking at,
how would it do that? Like, how would it interfere with the campaign you're running? Like, what's an example of that you've seen?
A lot of it would be just specific. I would say, like I said, within the requirements, you can't make any claims. So as long as you're following those guidelines and you're not, making a creative look too kiddish, or like it's targeting young people, things of that nature. Google looks at, I'm sorry, not Google, but different platforms where we're running programmatic ads, they look at that. And if it's too bright or it gives too much information that's kind of persuading a certain audience, they'll shut it down.
Okay, so like from a compliance perspective. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense. And then what are you most excited about for the future of the cannabis industry and cannabis marketing?
I'm really excited. I mean, as you all know, Twitter started laxing their regulations back in January. You know, Google also opened up to CBD and things of that nature. I think with this big shift that's happened within the economy and the marketplace, a lot of companies are going to start entertaining and allowing more things to come through the funnel. The regulations, of course, are going to change, but what excites me most is going to be, the e-com portion of the business and how that all unfolds. Because I mean, that's a piece that you definitely want to play into your marketing strategy, because you can use data from all of that and then kind of target. So you wanted to, really focus on what type of sales you're getting through e-com, and then you can use your other tactics to kind of tie that back around. So I would say, regulations federally, when that gets to that point, I don't know how far that out is, but eventually it's going to happen, And so I'm excited about that and giving, everybody a fair shot. Like for so many, years, cannabis, they're all business owners. Everyone's trying to make a living, and this doesn't feel like it's a fair, playing field, which is unfortunate. And I feel like a lot of things are coming down the pipe. It's going to be good.
Yeah, very much so. There's a lot that cannabis businesses are up against. I saw they reintroduced safe banking. 280E needs to be addressed. We talk about that a lot, about how your marketing expenses aren't write-offs, or they're not deductible, which is just like wild and unheard of in any other industry or space, because you're not being treated as a legitimate business, because that is part of the cost of doing business and getting your product and service out there. So with 280E, it makes it really hard to have any budget.
Yeah, and that's understandable. And so, some of the things that we try to do is, start off small and then scale your way up. Doing test campaigns are greatly beneficial. You can learn from them, and then grow that campaign out from there.
Yep, very much so. Anything else you want to mention as far as radio advertising, programmatic, that we haven't touched on today?
Yeah, so the last thing I just wanted to kind of explain the difference between a regular agency and a media company like Townsquare. Townsquare is full service. So whether you're looking for a website that needs to be created, launched, and optimized for SEO, or whether you're looking for radio, whether you're looking for events, whether you're looking for programmatic advertising, social media postings, things of that nature, I mean, we do it all. We also work with a lot of other agencies. So we do partnerships, we do white label situations where we'll do the work for you, and then we'll put your name on it and get those reports to your client with your name on it, things like that. And of course, cost is going to be a big part of that as well, versus going directly to a vendor, a media vendor like us, versus hiring someone that's going to have to go through that same path to purchase media is something to take into consideration as well.
What's the most cost-effective solution? It just depends.
It just depends on your situation. I've worked directly with clients, and then I've worked with clients that prefer me to go directly to their agency.
I think you said you approach clients and meet them where they're at.
That is correct. Yep.
Cool. Okay. Well, Andy, is there any contact information you want to share? Website, social handles? How can our listeners get a hold of you if they want to learn more?
Absolutely. So I can be reached direct. Best method of contact for me is going to be either email or phone. Could also be reached on LinkedIn. For my contact, you can reach me at 970-308-1981. My email address is going to be Andy, that's Andy, .Gonzales, GONZALES @townsquaremedia.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Andy Gonzales.
I think you're the first guest to give a phone number.
Hey, we still use it.
That's awesome. Okay, well, Andy, thank you so much for taking time to be on the show today. We'll share that contact information in the link in the show description. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at the Cannabis Marketing Summit next month.
Definitely looking forward to it as well.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening to today's episode. We'll see you next week, and we'll see you in June at the Cannabis Marketing Summit. Get your tickets now at thecannabismarketingassociation.com to get your free entry to the CMA 7's Marketing Awards.